what we're continuing to see since the pandemic is an onslaught of activity conducted by malicious actors that mean to do us harm. They mean to do students harm. So how could I take my lens as a former CIO, CTO? How could I help improve the lives of all kids moving forward? And the best way that I saw that moving forward now is to be able to help bolster cybersecurity capabilities inside of our K-12 spaces.
Well, welcome back, everybody, and thanks for tuning in to this edition of Leading Through Unprecedented Times. I'm Tom Murray, your host, and this episode is going to be a lot of fun. We have coming back one of our original future-ready advisors, somebody I'm proud to call a good friend, Vince Scheivert. Vince, how are you, my friend? How are you doing?
Tom, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. Super appreciate it, man. It's just excited to be back and be affiliated again with Future Ready, for sure.
Absolutely. What a pleasure and honor it is to have. We're going to dive into some of the work that you're doing across the country right now at Telos in just a little bit, but I want to actually go back and we originally connected. We were both CIOs, and then I moved to Future Ready. You were doing some of the most incredible digital equity work, and that's certainly as an equity-focused organization at Future Ready. It's something that we were highlighting 7 years ago, back when you were in Albemarle County with Pam Moran, one of our favorite superintendents who has since retired. And, there you were. We spotlighted you guys. I want to kind of walk through a little bit of a journey, because there you were in Southern Virginia, and then you moved, and I want to walk through a little bit of journey of your story to then where you are now. A lot of lessons learned, a lot of perspective that you had. So let's go back a number of years. The pandemic has forced digital equity to be front and center. At Future Ready, we've been talking about home access for at least 7 years since inception. But let's be real. It's been on the radar for 2 years for some places. But you've been having this conversation for a decade now, and we're doing some of the most innovative work. So bring us back to your time as CIO in Albemarle. Tell us a little bit of that story, digital equity, the why, what was behind it, some of the things that you were doing, and let's rewind a little bit. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Tom. And it was a real special time in Albemarle. And the part that triggers for me, like the visual when you bring it up, on Dr. Moran's desk, she had a little wooden carving that said "all means all." And for my first couple of years at Albemarle, like it didn't really trigger to me like what that really meant or what it was all about. But we ended up having, I ended up meeting a young woman because of Dr. Moran, who lived in a very rural area of Albemarle. And to understand Albemarle, it's almost directly centered in the state of Virginia. It's anchored inside the county. Albemarle County is anchored by Charlottesville, which is the home of the University of Virginia. So that has a hustling, urban kind of feel, vibe, all the bright lights and cool stuff you'd find in a big city, including connectivity. But as you moved outside and moved out from that radius of that central hub, you quickly went from suburban to rural and drastic rural, like no running water, kind of electricity spotty kind of piece. But we served all of those kids. And it was meeting this young girl who was down in Esmont, who had to compete for a college application, compete for a college scholarship. She had to drive 20 miles to the high school to get Wi-Fi access because it bled over at that time because we weren't doing stuff. So she had to actually go to the school and sit outside the school with a donated BlackBerry to do her stuff. And Dr. Moran introduced me to her, and she says, why does she have to struggle? Why should any of our kids have to struggle? And that kicked us off into an initiative. So before digital equity was a cool buzz term, it was kind of like all means all for us. And at that point, we initiated a series of actions to build out our own Wi-Fi, our own LTE network that would blanket the county and be able to provide universal access to all students to ensure that all meant all in Albemarle County.
Absolutely love that story as well. I mean, it really pulls at our heartstrings. But you were talking about a decade ago, correct? When you're having that conversation. So what's interesting in following your career, former CIO of the year, by the way, and congratulations about that. I'm sure it's on your wall somewhere, right? But with that, you then move to be an assistant superintendent in Northern Virginia, and you were in Loudoun County. And talk to us and compare and contrast the kind of very different districts, different parts of the state. Your role shifted, obviously the instructional component being front and center there as well. Talk to us a little bit about compare and contrast differences with that school system, where you were from your role and from your lens.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, there were drastic differences, and then there were amazing coincidences that were the same. So the drastic differences, right? Albemarle was about 10,000 kids. Loudoun's like 86,000. I went from having 20 schools to having over 110 schools, something like that, or sites. I went from essentially being in and around a hub to Loudoun County is data center capital of the world. 70–80% of all internet traffic globally passes through data centers in Loudoun County. However, the consistency was, for the sophistication that exists in Northern Virginia, the consistency was the lack of equity and access, that whether it was socioeconomic reasons or it was geographic reasons that people still lacked basic internet functionality and capability. And that all came to a head right at COVID. So that's where we saw a series of programs. We initiated, just prior, we initiated a huge fiber optic build to be able to ensure we had the type of connectivity at our schools and our sites that we needed. We leveraged all of our partners and our vendors from Khajiit to, I could run through probably 5 of them. Because we were still wrestling with that one problem of how do we ensure that kids have the instructional means and access to be successful and to be competing. We weren't providing like next generation tools. We were providing things like almost basic essential tools that kids needed. Everything was running on the internet. Everybody needed access to it. And those are probably some of the big challenges and differences that existed between Albemarle. And then we started to move on. So one of the big things that we tackled in Albemarle was just in and around big data. The data team, the data science team that is still at Albemarle, not at Albemarle, I'm sorry, in Loudoun, they're phenomenal. They're brilliant people. And they started to tackle that idea of how do we make data actionable? How do we do it how do we work better instructionally to be more targeted and more focused? How do we identify kids? So we were collecting and ingesting data in a series of places, and through a visualization tool, being able to bring data to life for our instructors, for our administrators, for our parents, and for our community. It's cool stuff.
That is awesome stuff. I mean, let's be real. How many times in K-12 education do we over collect and then underutilize? Do we collect all this data, look at it, talk about it, and then keep doing what we were going to do anyway, right? I mean, just being real when it comes to that. And I remember at Future Ready, we highlighted some of that work that you were doing to truly be able to visualize, break down some of those barriers for teachers so that they weren't going to 47 different places to look at 32 different reports to try and make sense of it, but to really pull it together to do that. Really some next generational thinking there just to support the instruction like should be had. Now, granted, it was a large district, and some people that might be listening say like data science team, I am district office, right? And we understand that it's small rural places, but to look at what some of the places like Loudoun are doing in that is truly, truly incredible. But then, my friend, more recently, you took a jump. Now,
Yeah.
as a former CIO myself, I have to ask, because you took a jump to a place that's now a future ready partner that we are really, really proud of some of the work that we're going to be doing, releasing some things that we'll be working on together. You run over to Telos. So here you leave and you leave, you go to the other side. Now you go to the corporate side, but your lens has now become even more massive, way outside of Virginia with the stuff that you're seeing. And so talk to superintendents, talk to CIOs for the rest of this podcast, just on some of the work that you're seeing, some of the fears that we're seeing out there in schools, because we both have that district level experience, but the times are changing very, very quickly. So talk to us about, why did you make that jump? Why did you leave that school system to go do the work that you're doing now?
Yeah. So Tom, I've driven myself to be able to, it's been my passion to be able to impact student lives. That's why I went into education. And ironically, it's why I left. After we worked through the pandemic, or at least kind of what got over the hump, is where I saw a need. So today I'm the vice president of technical sales for SLED, state, local, EDU, and regulated industries here at Telos. And Telos is a cybersecurity firm. But what we saw in the pandemic, and what we're continuing to see since the pandemic, is an onslaught of activity conducted by malicious actors that mean to do us harm. They mean to do students harm. So how could I take my lens as a former CIO, CTO? How could I help improve the lives of all kids moving forward? And the best way that I saw that moving forward now is to be able to help bolster cybersecurity capabilities inside of our K-12 spaces.
Yeah. Now, before anybody listening thinks we're going to get real technical, we won't. We're going to dive further into this on our technology podcast with Adam and Carl. They'll dive further into this as well. But let's be real. If I'm a superintendent listening or a CIO listening, every year, superintendents and CIOs are losing their jobs because of the areas that we're about to talk about. And let's be real, the pandemic has also amplified as the boundaries have shifted in these areas. You know, having been that CIO, having gone one-to-one at our high school, distributed and deployed. I know when you were at Loudon, you guys had deployed like tens of thousands of computers as well. The pandemic's changed that. Right? We're not just talking about at school anymore. So talk to us a little bit about what you could. I mean, let's face it, for those of you who are listening as well, one of the reasons that we partnered with Telos, we consider them best of breed. I know they're strong allies with our Department of Defense, with the intelligence community. And so if they're good enough for them, they're certainly going to be a partner for us in this work. And the field and the work they're doing is absolutely incredible and truly next gen. The other thing, Vince, is I mean, we were originally connected as tech directors here in Pennsylvania in our early days. Yeah. What kept me up at night was, we were doubling and tripling over multiple years, all the devices and all the stuff, but yet my team didn't get any bigger. And sometimes our funding got cut, and we were trying to do more and more with less and less, which is, it seems like every year in education, we seem to be doing that. And so I know we were trying to do things, and that was pre-pandemic when everything was basically on campus. So now all of these problems really have gone through the roof for superintendents, for tech directors, and even for classroom teachers that are trying to teach virtually with so many different things related to privacy, cybersecurity, and whatnot. So talk to us, if you would, kind of putting that assistant superintendent hat back on, big picture about some of the issues that you're seeing out there, some of those pieces, and then we'll dive into a little bit about what some of the next gen things that schools can be aware of, that they can start to take advantage of to do things differently to better support our kids and keep them safe.
Yeah, for sure. So like I said, with 100 campuses, I knew what the security boundaries were. I knew that kids essentially were going to utilize devices inside and on my campus, and I could keep them safe, and I could keep them secure. I invested tools, resources, materials, money, people to be able to build that bubble to keep them safe and secure. But I deployed 86,000 Chromebooks to give to kids to be able to ensure that they had access and resources and materials. When the pandemic splashed, my robust security capabilities that I have in all of my campuses no longer mattered. What mattered was the security capabilities that students now had at home, or had at Starbucks, or had at McDonald's, or the library. So we lost containment. We lost our security boundary. So how do we, and this was a big driver for me jumping over into this space, because it won't be less than any more than it will be right now. Like, this is the least connected kids will ever be in their lives. Every point from this point forward, they'll be more connected. So how do we have security capabilities in place to keep them secure if we really want them to be safe and secure 24/7? Because as a technology director, I bought that device, I sent it home with them, knowing that 17 hours out of the day, they're not going to be connected to me. They're only connected to me when they're at school. But what happens to them? And a content filter is great, and it'll keep them from inappropriate content. It doesn't keep you safe. It doesn't keep you safe from malicious actors that want to do kids harm.
Now, can I pause you for a sec? So if I'm somebody listening to this that doesn't have that technical background, that thinks, well, yeah, we have a filter, like what else would you need? Can you give some examples to them of just things that you've seen happen, across our nation where things have happened that have caused either a district harm or, a student, whatever it might be? Give some examples if you could right there.
Yeah. So, what we got to know is the internet is filled with a lot of great resources and a lot of great spots. The internet is also filled with little traps that we run into that we don't realize we're running into. And those little traps will capture usernames, they'll capture passwords, they'll capture all kinds of information. It's that information that bad actors then use to continue the process and kind of flow downhill like water, so to speak, and find their path into our environments. And then that leads to more destructive activity. So things continually build and snowball from just maybe being out at a McDonald's and surfing the internet. So if you don't have a secure way of communicating and connections, and a typical 256 internet, the old HTTPS, that's not quite as robust as it once was. So how do we have more secure capabilities?
Yeah, great point. You talk often about, student identities and digital footprints, and obviously, and I loved what you were saying, kids, they are the least connected in life that they will be ever really moving forward as things evolve, things change, technologies change. You talk to us a little bit, if you could, about, their digital footprint, the identities in which you talk about, if you could. Obviously so relevant, not just for our teenagers, but we see some of our youngest kids staying connected, going home, being on their iPad, being on their other device, whatever it might be. Talk to us a little bit about that, if you could.
Yeah. So we refer to at Telos, we kind of refer to it as two different things. So you have your digital footprint, and then you have digital exhaust, right? So your footprint, you're leaving tangible things, but with the exhaust, sometimes you just leave a trail. Now, both good actors and bad actors, meaning you have companies that utilize your digital footprint to be able to sell you things, to market you things when you're on the internet. That's like when you're surfing the internet and then all of a sudden you pop open Facebook and you're like, oh my God, I was just looking at umbrellas over here, and now Amazon's showing me I could buy an umbrella for $9.99.
Hold on, wait, that's not a sign from God, because all I know is I see somewhere for the Caribbean, and I'm like, that must have been a sign. I'm meant to go to Aruba.
Caribbean
right?
may be a sign.
I just looked it up, but I am meant to go to Aruba. What do you mean? That's not a sign?
But the umbrella is totally, the fix is in. So, but people that mean to do us harm also harvest that same information. And it's important to understand when we talk digital identity, we talk identities for students. A student under the age of 13 their digital identity or their personal information and personal data, that is the most expensive data and information available on the dark web. It has the highest value. And think about it. What are you not allowed to do before you turn 13? You're essentially a ghost. You don't have a Facebook page. You don't have an email address because you're not technically allowed to, right? You can only really start that at 13. So from 13 to 17, kids start to build a digital footprint and a digital persona. Obviously, when they turn 18, it expands. But if, like, human traffickers, when they're trying to find identities to be able to move kids back and forth across the border, they're able to harvest information and data from school systems and be able to use it to be able to make that transition and give a kid an identity. One of the things we're seeing now, Tom, kids are going up to be able to get their driver's license at the age of 16. And the DMV saying, no, we're sorry, we've already issued your driver's license. They're like, well, I'm me. And they're like, well, not according to this. So that's a big piece of what's happening. So what we're seeing too is with ransomware, obviously everybody knows that ransomware is a big thing and the tickets are. We're also seeing ransomware become a lot more malicious, which means what they're looking for, what those bad folks are looking for are two paydays. One is upfront, you know it, but the second one is harvesting all of your information and your data. And again, the student information, the student data will be sold hundreds of times, could potentially be stolen and bought and sold on the dark web hundreds of times before they turn 13.
Yes. And I mean, I'm also hearing what you're saying as a father, right? A father of a little girl, a little boy, and just processing their future, their identities online, all those pieces. And I'm sure as you were just talking, some people kind of perked up, maybe even gave them some chills of, man, when we start talking about child trafficking and identities or those things, or the story of the license that they're seeing, I mean, that gets to be pretty scary stuff. And I got so excited with you talking about some of the things that you were doing to combat that. And again, when you're working alongside our allies with some of the places that I mentioned earlier, it's going to be some of the best of breed stuff. Give us just a couple minutes of what you guys are working on at Telos that is possible for school districts that has completely changed the game. Yet I would say most tech directors probably aren't really aware of some of those pieces. And I say that to my former colleagues with the utmost respect, because what you're doing really is a game changer as a former CIO. And if I'm a superintendent listening or principal listening, I mean, their digital footprints or digital identities, keeping our babies safe is really one of the most important things we can do and a complete non-negotiable. So tell us about a couple of things that you're doing that really hinder some of the issues that we were talking about and can really support districts.
Yeah, so 100%, and it resonates for me as a dad, right? So I'm a dad of three high school kids. So they're on their device all the time, their school issue device all the time. Some of the things that we do is we have a technology that what we would refer to as we eliminate the digital footprint and the digital exhaust. We essentially are, it's kind of funny, I got to use the name in the kind of the discussion, but we actually turn you into a ghost on the internet. There is no attributable information about you or where you're going, meaning the destination IP that you're going to or where you came from. So at no point can an individual be targeted to be able to figure out, okay, I know this traffic is coming from Loudoun County. Well, that's going to have kids on it. Let me jump on there and see what I can find. The other thing that happens is we have multiple layers of encryption that get applied to our internet traffic. So inside of that, like I said, we know people. There are people that can get through the 256, but they can't get through 3 or 4 layers of 256 in the amount that transmission is crossing the wire. So our technology does that. It fully protects, eliminates the capability to be able to, for good and bad actors, to be able to track and find students. In the event that a student would hit or a teacher would hit like a website or do something that would initiate the denial of service attack, that denial of service attack can't find its way back to the school division to shut it down, because that path doesn't exist. So without getting too technical, because that's kind of where you start to make a left towards Albuquerque to explain that, our technology really mitigates the capability of DDoS attacks, ransomware, as well as ensure that students operating on any network are as safe and secure as maybe our friends in the intelligence community.
That's incredible. And, you know, as a former CIO, that's the stuff that kept me up at night. I'm not going to lie. That's the stuff that I wear. Every year we hear about the teacher that clicked on the email or the principal that clicked on the email link. And, you know, we all know that from our personal lives, but it's happening in schools all the time. And I think about, you know, the ransomware attacks, the shutting it down at that scale, or, you know, let's talk about one other piece before we wrap up that's so relevant right now. Such a hot topic when it comes to this is around cyber insurance. And man, you want to talk about it. I will tell you, in my last year as a CIO, is one of the final things that I kind of put in place before I left. And a lot has changed since that time. But it is a hot topic right now. So talk to leaders, because some of them might be thinking like, what, no, cyber insurance? Like, what are you talking about? But if I'm a superintendent, I'm a business manager, listen, I'm an IT director, I know exactly what we're talking about, because it's a hot button issue. Talk to us about what we're seeing there and any thoughts you have.
Yeah. So cyber insurance has, it is completely blown up. Partly because everybody thought that it would kind of be like, I bought car insurance, so then I can just crash my car. Like, that's not the way it works. Like, car insurance isn't a defense mechanism for me out there being out driving. Cyber insurance shouldn't be either. The issue we have right now is in cyber insurance is cyber insurance companies are losing their shirts. They're paying 70 to 80% of their premiums, when good business would say that should be around 10 to 15%. So we're seeing companies drop out of offering it, which means they're going to turn around and tell the school division, yeah, we're not going to offer cyber insurance. If they do offer it, what we're seeing is anywhere from a 3 to 4 times increase over what last year's premiums were. So if you think about it, if you're a larger school system and you were paying like $200,000 in cyber insurance, now you're up close to $1 million in cyber insurance. And the big thing every insurance company wants to know is, how risky are you? How much risk are you at? Do you know where your problems are? Do you know where your skeletons are hiding? And can you tell us? And again, that's another area to where we have the ability to help and assist, being able to ensure that an organization has full visibility over their digital, their cyber risk, and where they are at any given point to be able to do that. So if an insurance company walks in, if somebody comes in that says, hey, I need to know what how well, or an audit, you have the ability to quickly be able to generate that information. And Tom, that's not just a K-12 problem. That's a K-12 problem. That's a university problem. That's a public sector problem right now. Whether it's excessively, maybe one of the largest schools, maybe one of the largest university systems in the country that can't get cyber insurance for all of its campuses. These are real issues that cost real money, because for every dollar you have to invest in cyber insurance, that's money you can invest to solve digital equity. It's money you can invest in reading books. It's money you can invest in teachers. So we'd love to be able to figure out a way to be able to help reduce that amount of risk, help school divisions reduce risk, reduce their spending power by making sure that they divert the money and have the ability to divert the money to where it really matters.
Wow. Well, I will tell you, this may be the very first Future Ready podcast that I've done that some folks are listening and they're white as a ghost thinking, I got work to do in this area. And we need to have some conversations in this area. But fortunately, there's amazing places like Telos that they can do that, have those conversations, connect with you out there personally. Vince, the final question for you that we like to ask all of our guests: put your dad hat on, put your assistant superintendent hat on, put your CIO hat back on, your Telos hat back on. Here we are 2 years into this pandemic. What is it that gives you hope right now?
Tom, it's the people. It's the people. When I look at my kids, even during the pandemic, just the resiliency. The kids just made it happen. They just made it work. It just became the way school was for them. And seeing that kind of gave me hope that it'll be okay. Will they get all the algebra lessons that they may need to supposedly get? Maybe not. But I think they're going to be just fine.
Love that. And the resilience that you're talking about is really our theme for this season. That's Vince Scheivert, everyone. Vince, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate you having me, bud.